Today's homework video is about the judicial branch and federalism. Homework video number 5. Federalism, hopefully you all remember, is the balance of power between states and national government. Define political power. Think about what power means. What does it mean to have power over somebody? Try to write a definition for yourself. Now, hopefully your definition of political power is the ability to get someone to do what you want them to do. And there's lots of different ways to do that. When originally created, the federal government had very limited power. Remember, they were coming off of a monarchy, and the national government and the states did not want the national government to have too much power over them. They were worried they'd just get another monarchy, another king. So states and federal government are in a competition for who can have more power. And competition oftentimes plays out in the court system. So to change the balance, Congress can write laws giving themselves more power or taking power away from themselves. The executive branch, of course, can strongly enforce things against the state or back off and let the states do what they want. And of course, the Supreme Court can then decide cases between states and the federal government for this balance. Now, you're going to be seeing this image a lot in these slides. The more weight you have, the more power. So more weight means you're lower on this balance. So if you're on this right-hand side, then you have the most power in this situation. So who has the most power in this picture? You should be saying the states. Now, who had more power in the Constitution when it was originally written? States. They had reserved powers and everything was left over for them. So the states have more power than the federal government. Remember, it's all about reserved powers. Now, when it comes to writing laws, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 says that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states. So we know that laws have to follow the Constitution. The Commerce Clause says they can write laws about commerce, aka business. And then the Elastic Clause says that Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. So basically, they can write any law necessary and proper, okay with the Constitution, to fulfill their Commerce Clause. Now, who gets to decide whether it's proper? The Supreme Court. For each law, you need to write down what it is. Did it make the federal government stronger or weaker? And did it make the state government stronger or weaker? So, if one gets stronger, then the other has to get weaker. The Civil Rights Act. As we know, it ended segregation, promoted the equalization of races, and is an unfunded mandate. So who do you think would get more power? Who's going to be over here? If you said the federal government, you'd be correct. The states had much less power than the federal government, because the states are being told what to do. It's saying you must stop segregating down in the South. You must make it equal between the races. The Clean Air Act of 1970 was a law requiring the enforcement of environmental laws, in this case, air. So it was also an unfunded mandate, which means that the states got no money and were being told what to do. So, again, who would have more power? You said the federal government. Again, you are correct. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Anti-discrimination law for people with disabilities. Again, no money. States are being told they can't discriminate against people with disabilities. So again, who would have more power here? The federal government, because they're telling states what to do. So we can see a lot of these laws, especially unfunded mandates, they are giving the federal government a whole lot of power. Now, the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act of 1995 said the government should pay the cost of obeying federal mandates if it displaces funding for other programs. So here, the state actually gets more power because they're saying every time the federal government tells us what to do, they have to pay for it. The Welfare Reform Act of 1996 turned welfare programs from categorical grants into block grants. Remember, categorical grants are favored by the federal government because they are more specific and strict, while a block grant is favored by the states. So if it's turning them from what the federal government likes to what states like, then, of course, states would have more power in this situation. No Child Left Behind was a categorical grant for federal education funding that required a high-stakes standardized test. This would make the federal government more power. Now, this is just your opinion. Who do you think should have more power, states or the federal government? Now to the Supreme Court. So, as we know, a case gets brought to the court challenging some type of law or action, and the Supreme Court has to decide whether the laws or actions taken are constitutional. If they are constitutional, then they're okay and continue as is, and if they're unconstitutional, they are changed or thrown out. Now, when it comes to the Supreme Court and federalism, these are the kinds of cases the Supreme Court could deal with that have to do with states. So, the state could challenge a federal law, so saying that the federal government does not have the right to tell them what to do. The federal government could challenge a state if they believe the state is violating a federal law. A state could challenge another state. And we have selective incorporation, where a state gets sued by just about anybody, you or me, for not following the Bill of Rights. We're going to start with number 1, state challenging a federal law. So here we have an example of a federal law getting challenged. In this case, the Obama's Affordable Health Care Act. So that was signed into law in 2009. And between 2009 and 2011, 25 states sued, saying that portion of the bill was unconstitutional. In 2012, the Supreme Court heard the case, and they decided the law is constitutional, but they made certain parts optional for states. The next kind of case is the federal government challenging a state. Here we have McCulloch versus Maryland of 1819, one of your vocab words. The issue was that Maryland wanted to tax a federal bank that was operating in their state, and the federal government refused to pay the state tax. Maryland wanted to show that states were more powerful than the national government. And the question then became, can the federal government open a bank in the state that doesn't want it, and can the state try to punish the bank? The result, you need to write this down because it's not actually going to be on the slide. Yes, the federal government can put banks wherever it wants, and the states cannot punish them, which means the federal government got stronger. Check your flashcards. We have another one here where the United States challenged Texas allowing people to carry guns into school property. The issue was the gun-free school zone. It was a law that banned the possession of a firearm within 1,000 feet of the school, and of course 12-year-old Lopez carried a gun on the property, as we know. The result was that the law was declared unconstitutional. In this case, the states won power, and it limited the national government. Next, we have states versus states. Here, we have Gibbons versus Ogden. Now, this is a state versus state issue. Ogden received a state license to run a ferry across the Hudson River. Gibbons obtained a federal license. Ogden sued, saying he had the valid license. In this case, the question was, whose license was more valid, the national government's or the state government's? The answer was the national government. So basically, this was the supremacy clause being validated by the Supreme Court. The national government is supreme to the states. Now, the last one here, we have selective incorporation. Tinker v. Des Moines is a very important case. Students wore black armbands to protest the Vietnam War in their school, and they got suspended. Now, this school is a public school paid for government money. The students argued that the state violated their freedom of symbolic speech, that they were allowed to wear the black armband under their First Amendment rights. The court stated that students do not lose their freedom of speech rights in high school, therefore they have a right to protest under the First Amendment. So in this case, the state, Des Moines, Iowa, lost, and the federal government, got more powerful because they are basically saying you have to follow the U.S. Constitution just like us. And that's it.